This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Cool, man. Happy Sunday morning, everybody. Special guest in the house today. I've been on Scott's show about a year ago, episode 268, if you want to go check that out. But that's not the point. We have Scott DeLuzio, the host of the Drive On podcast. And in honor of September being Suicide Prevention Month, Scott does a lot of really good work and talking and getting information out on that subject on his podcast. So welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here. Looking forward to, having this conversation with you guys and seeing, how we might be able to help some folks out.
Yeah, man. I got a book in front of me. It says Surviving Son, and there's a subheading on there or a subtitle on there. But why don't you tell us a little bit about just how you got to the point where you felt compelled to host a podcast on that specific topic, like veterans' mental health?
Yeah. So the book itself is my story. So I was deployed to Afghanistan. My younger brother, he was also in the Army. We were both deployed to Afghanistan at the same time. Unfortunately, he didn't make it home, which is kind of where that title "Surviving Son" comes from. And I came back and I was a wreck. I had so many of my own problems just dealing with not only the loss of my brother, which was huge, but the PTSD, the grief, the guilt, the survivor's guilt, that type of stuff. Just dealing with all that stuff, I was just really a wreck. And then the guys that I served with in my company, we were fortunate. We didn't lose a single person.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Wow.
But we started losing when we came home. And I was like, man, that's
impossible. How does that happen?
How does that, you're in a place where people wanted to kill you and you survived. And you came back where people want nothing but the best for you. There's all sorts of resources out there. People who are willing to move heaven and earth to get you the help, the resources, everything that you need. Now we're losing people.
Hey, what year was this, by the way?
So I was in Afghanistan in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, and then over the course of several years, started losing some guys, and I was like, man, this sucks. Like, I didn't want to just sit around waiting for another phone call saying, another guy that we knew that we served with, that they're gone now, and so I started writing the book around the same time that I started my podcast that you talked about, the Drive On podcast. And really the goal of the podcast was to share stories and resources and give people hope and help people deal with whatever it is that they're dealing with. There's all sorts of stuff that people might be dealing with. And there's a whole series of reasons why someone might kind of make that decision in their life. And it's like, it's complicated. And there's a lot of things that go into it. And let's try to promote some of these resources.
Yeah.
And so that's really where, the podcast came from. The book was really just telling my story to be like, hey, look, I understand. We were talking about this before we started recording. Like, sometimes life sucks. Sometimes you get dealt a bad hand, but what do you do with that hand? And, you could sit there and you could drink it away, and it's not going to help anything.
Yeah.
Found that out. That's one way you can go. But if you're going to be doing that, that's just such a waste of the gift that you've been given.
Yeah.
And so I try to use my story as an example of shit can suck sometimes, but what are you going to do with it?
I mean, dude, you lost a brother, man. Like that's huge. That's way beyond just having a bad day.
Yeah.
that's tremendous loss. And I know several people who, Gold Star type families who have lost family members or even very close friends, lifelong childhood friends and stuff. And God, I can't imagine the lasting impact that has. But then there's the other side of that coin, and it's, man, there's always a solution to the problem. There's always a way out of this. And that's what pains me about the experiences that we had last year is, God, dude, there's always a way through this. How do we sitting here as, fairly functional individuals, how do we help somebody like that who's going down that road so far that they might be considering something like this?
I mean, having those resources, talking about it, having those resources in front of people and sharing stories like, the way I did, the way other people do. I have on my show, I have people all the time talking about the struggles that they've gone through and how they came through the other side better off for it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that earlier too.
Well, that's resiliency, right?
Yeah,
Resiliency
exactly.
isn't just getting through something, but it's figuring out the lessons learned and the changes that you need to make, and then coming up with a game plan, and then on the other side of it being better for that process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you specifically, did you find writing that book to be helpful for you? Because, Roscoe's a great storyteller. I'm not, but I think that there's a lot of power in story, right? And I also think that this is something that's very nuanced in some ways. It's dealing with these things is a very individualistic process.
Very
like
intimate.
there's, obviously there's probably a range of things that work for the majority of people, but for some people it may just be, and you don't even have to publish a book, but maybe just journaling and writing about your experiences and getting some of that stuff off of your chest and kind of out of your mind, letting your brain process it. So I'd be curious to see, Scott, for you with losing your brother, did you find writing the book to be helpful in that process for you?
It opened some wounds as I was writing the book. It was a tough process.
For sure.
I bet it was.
To do. But one of the things that I realized in the writing process, and even later on in therapy, and just writing things down slows you down as you're writing. And like you said, you don't have to publish a book and put it out there for the whole world to see.
Right.
I don't go out there and pick up the book and read it, and now they know some of the most intimate moments of my life. It's like, that's kind of a big ask for some people, right? But there's nothing stopping you from going to Walmart and getting a $2 notebook and just sitting down and just writing. And you could burn that notebook after you're done.
Yeah.
For all I care.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you want to do, I don't care what you do with it. But the process of writing, when you slow down and write, it gives your brain a chance to think about some of the other things, and it actually allowed me to remember things that, oh my God, that happened too. And I'm starting to now paint a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And now that might sound scary for some people. It's like, I don't want to remember all that stuff. But sometimes that's where the healing takes place.
Yeah.
Is when you start to uncover peel back the layers of that onion. And I cried when I wrote this book.
I'm sure.
There were times that I was
you did.
I got to stop. I just can't keep going right now.
Yeah.
So it did take me a while to write, but there are pieces of it that I skipped over. I was like, I'm going to come back to this later.
Yeah.
I just don't have it in me right now to write this part. And I'll go on to something else. And that's what I did. But when I got to those parts and I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to start writing this. It did allow me to kind of process a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's important for the listeners to understand, because if you're dealing with trauma, and it doesn't have to be from military service, it could come in a whole bunch of different forms, right? Like being able to have a venue where you can start to unpack those things, I think is a very important process, right? Like until you can kind of go through that stuff, and because your mind will compartmentalize it, right? Mm-hmm. It'll show. I mean, you talk up, Alicia works with people specifically with trauma, and a lot of times if it's traumatic enough that people won't remember things, right? Because their brain just kind of tries to isolate it, to protect them. Like your brain's smart to a certain extent, and it'll try
preservation.
Right. It's self-preservation. And so having an opportunity to unpack that, whether it's, journaling, writing a book, sometimes just talking about it, right? Finding a good therapist and being able to sit across,
or a good close friend,
or a good friend. Yeah. And just sharing those things with. The point is I think the importance is if you're dealing or struggling with anything like this, you got to reach out in some capacity, right? And I think what's hard for folks too, especially men, and maybe even to a greater extent, guys that have served, is it's an extremely transparent and vulnerable process, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a comfortable fucking place for us to be at all.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
We're not accustomed to that.
No, we're not. So I'd just be curious, like, because I think you were kind of alluding to it as you wrote the book, right? Like going through some of those things, having some of those memories and those emotions. I mean, that's got to be a very difficult process to sit through and to continue to engage over, however long it took you to write the book. I'd imagine a couple of years probably to unpack all that stuff. So can you talk to that though, like the vulnerability, the transparency, or anything that you've learned on through the discussions that you've had on your own podcast about the importance of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think it's incredibly important to be honest with whether it's therapy or talking to a friend or writing a book, journaling, whatever it is. Be honest in those conversations, because that's, again, a big part of it, because you may start going down another path trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist or really isn't that big of a problem.
Well, I think it's important too to be honest with yourself, right? And to, I think at some point recognize that whatever this thing is, it's had a huge impact on you, and that's okay. Like it would have a huge impact on anybody that had to face.
I don't want to steal away. I want you to get back to what you were talking about. But what we're talking about here is self-inspection. That's courage. Like it's going to take a lot of courage to sit there with that. What is effectively probably a stranger asking you these questions and expecting you to dive deep on these things. And, you're sitting here saying you have to be honest and truthful and everything. First of all, you have to be truthful with yourself. But, man, that takes a lot of courage to be able to throw that out there and hope and pray that these people are going to be non-judgmental. And, I'm basically opening my soul for you guys. That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I've just, full of transparency here, I've talked to several therapists over the years, and I've never walked out of an appointment with any of them, any of the sessions, thinking, man, this guy's going to go post all this stuff on social media, and he's going to tell the whole world about everything.
He loses his license, but that's beside the point.
Exactly. Right. No. It was not like I felt like I was being judged, or that he was going to be like, check out this guy. This guy's pretty fucked up. He's going to go talk to his buddies about it or anything like that. It's like, it was like the person on the other end there, they had a genuine interest in trying to help me, and that's what you need, and that's what you get out of these things. But going back to the original thing of how these things, being honest with yourself, being honest in these sessions, these things are there to help you, and if you're not using it the way it's intended to be used, it's not going to work. And so you have to really think hard about what it is that you're trying to get out of this.
Well, I want to offer the listeners just maybe a different perspective too. Sure. And we're talking about a very specific incident that happened in your life. You lost your brother in a war zone. All right. My example that I want to throw out there is I have a very close family member who, she thought that she caught her husband cheating on her. All right. And she kind of went berserker for a little bit and did a lot of threats and everything. She ends up coming and staying at my house for a while. And one of the things that I had her do, one of the processes that I had her do, was go get a notebook. I want you to go get a notebook. And every time you have a thought, whether it's a good thought or a bad thought, ill will, whatever it is, I just want you to write it down. And it can be just one sentence. It can be like a bullet. You could write a whole paragraph or fill up a page, whatever. And then, a few weeks later, we're going to go back to that and we're going to read over that, because I think it is important what you were talking about. You were talking about how emotional it was and how you really had to kind of open up. And I think that's important, and get that stuff out, get it out of your system, right? I'm going to kill this motherfucker. Get it out there, man. Put it down on paper. It's just between you and the page. All right. Yep. But then let's go back to it a few weeks later and let's maybe reevaluate that. Let those emotions die down. One thing that we talk about on the show a lot is, emotional decisions versus objective decisions, and when you act out of emotion, typically that's probably not the best action that you can do. Obviously there's a time and a place, and when the reptilian brain takes over and it's a reaction. But what we're really looking for here is we're looking for to find that space in the middle between the stimulus and the response. Think about it for just a second, and then move out. And I think that's probably a key thing here when we're talking about someone taking their own life, man. If we can just get them to stop just for a second, right? Let's just stop. Let's talk about this for a little bit, and let's find that space in there and really nug down to what the problem is.
There was a conversation I had with another veteran a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago on my show. It said, if you're feeling like you're in that place where you want to take your life, go take a cold shower. That'll snap you out. Get in that cold water, which I know we're all here in Arizona for the last couple months.
There's no cold water.
Oh, I can still get a cold shower out in Whitman. So,
okay.
Yeah, thanks.
We don't have that over here. Right?
Yeah.
I remember when my kids were young, and giving them baths, we put like ice packs in the water just to cool it down, because otherwise they'd have like 3rd-degree burns or whatever. But seriously, like you were saying, pause, think.
It takes you out of that space for a second.
Yeah.
Because when you take a cold shower, you're not thinking about anything else.
No.
Yeah.
You're thinking, I need to get the hell out of
That's
here.
right. That's right. No, that's valid, man. That's a good analogy. Or a good point.
And maybe it's not a cold shower. Maybe it's something else. But think about something, and take that pause and get yourself out of that space that you were in.
Well, just generally speaking in your life, I think you need to find a way to, I don't know, let go and distract yourself from everyday stuff, and we use the example of exercise a lot here. And dude, when we were going through that workout yesterday, we weren't thinking about anything else.
You can't.
We don't give a shit about the bills or, what kind of mood the wife is going to be in when she wakes up, or the dog's messing the house. You don't care about any of that. It's just, fuck, man, my breathing is out of control right now. I've got my shoulders are smoked. That's the only thing that you're thinking about. And I think that's important, because that takes you out of that headspace where you're dwelling on maybe that one event or that one thing that's bringing you down. If you can find a way to remove yourself from that and focus entirely, take the cold shower, and you're not thinking about anything else about how bad that sucks, that's important, I think. And that creates a little bit of that space for you to be able to come back and really think about, really go down into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do that, like you said, it creates that space, but it gives you just a moment to think of the perspective of big picture kind of stuff. And they've done interviews with people who have attempted suicide. They jumped off a bridge or something like that, but they survived the attempt. And almost all the people on the way down, as they're jumping off that bridge,
They're like, oh fuck,
like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
And there's no like, I grow wings and I start flying and I go back up to the bridge.
You're committed now, dude.
Yeah.
You're in it. Like, now you gotta deal with it. Whatever the outcome happens to be. And a lot of times they're fucked up afterwards, because you jump off a bridge that's supposed to kill you, but it didn't. And
what does that do for their headspace, though? What's the mental outcome of that? Do you go, well, now I'm just, is that person more likely to view themselves as a complete failure? Like, dude, I even failed at that shit. Or do they kind of snap out of it? Like, what's your experience in that?
I think, a good way to look at it for anyone who unfortunately might find themselves in that situation is, you've been given another chance at this.
Yeah, that's a great outlook.
Don't fuck it up. Like, you got that chance. Use it and do something great with it.
Mm-hmm.
Look, man, we've all done something in our life that we failed at, right? So, like, everybody has failed at something. Go back to when you were a kid and you were learning how to ride a bike and you fell off and you scraped your knee or whatever. Like, you failed at that moment, right? So don't look at things as, like, just life in general. Don't look at things as a failure because you didn't do things. You can find the good in just about anything. And including something as terrible and awful as that.
Yeah.
The good, you got a second chance.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we talk about that a lot on the podcast, right? That failure is one of our greatest teachers,
right.
and that it's really a path of opportunity and learning and growth. It's not necessarily, it's couched in our society and in our culture as a bad thing, but it doesn't have to be, right? It's actually how we learn and how we grow and how we make pivots and take lessons away that we can get better from. But I think too, what I hear you getting at a little bit, Scott, is kind of one thing that's important to do if you're somebody who may be struggling with these things is try to find a way to get a little bit of a concept of gratitude in your life, right? And so, do you want to talk about that at all, like the importance of gratitude and maybe just getting to a place where you can recognize that even if maybe where you're at isn't where you want to be or kind of feels shitty to you, like there's still some things that you can find to be grateful for?
Well, absolutely. And I think just going back to what I was talking about as far as how you can find the good in just about anything. I think it was Thomas Edison who was saying that I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
That's right.
Yeah.
I found 10,000 ways to not make a light bulb.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so like when you shift that perspective, because if you think about it, I don't know if that number 10,000 is actually accurate. 10,001 and boom, the light bulb went off and he actually figured it out. But if you think about it, if you were sitting there and it's like, okay, first try, failed, second try, failed, third try, failed. How many tries before you quit?
Yeah.
Right. We wouldn't have these light bulbs going on up here if he was just like, you know what, 5 times, fuck it. I guess it's just not going to work.
I guess I'm not born to be a light maker.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, I guess that's going to be on somebody else. But and think about all the other advancements that came after that. Right. So there's good that came from that failure. And so, being grateful for the failures, because each one of those things, he learned something from each one of those failures, and be grateful for that, because that made that next attempt that much closer to hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I know that's just one example, but like anything in your life, I mean, from the time that you were a kid to the time that you're old and pooping your pants, like you're gonna be failing at something.
Yeah.
But what do you do with that? And how do you get better from that? But be grateful for those failures. Be grateful for the opportunity for that. And gratitude is a big thing, because it's like I said, it's hard to be grateful for something not going your way, or it's hard to be grateful for something not going your way. But when you change your mindset about it and you start saying, well, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
You change it from a failure to an opportunity. Like, okay, now I've been given this extra chance at something. I've been given something else. Whatever the situation is, there's a way to spin it so that you can find some.
That's kind of the way that we like to talk about it too, is frame it more as an opportunity than the event itself. But put yourself in the headspace of a person who's just kind of gotten repeatedly kicked in the nuts over and over and over again, and maybe they don't have as many reps as some of us do at not doing great. Like flying jets, like I don't know how many sorties I flew, but I never flew a perfect one.
Yeah.
There's always something to get better at, and you get used to the idea that it's not going to be perfect. You're going to fuck some things up. You're going to fail. The mission's not going to work. The plan's not going to work. You spend in the Army, you guys spend 6 months planning up a mission, and you go out there and fuck, man, it just didn't work. And so I think we have an excellent opportunity and perspective here, because we got so many reps at it that failure is not the end of the world for us. It's like, okay, well, let's see what we can learn from it and apply that to the next one. But if you're just a normal guy out there who maybe doesn't have that experience, and you go through a 6-month phase of your life where shit's just not going your way, bro, you're just getting kicked in the balls over and over again. How do you get out of that?
It's what you do with it in the moment. You were saying, in the Army, we take 6 months to plan a mission, and then we walk out the gate, and it's like immediately it's pretty much not going to plan.
That's the Army standard.
That sounds about right. If only the field manual told me this was going to happen.
Right. Exactly.
Who was supposed to bring the MREs?
Got to wait for the Air Force to fly them in. But no, seriously, like, what do you do? How do you pivot and adjust from that?
Yeah.
In that moment when things are not going your way, because they're not always going to go your way, and sometimes it's in your control. Sometimes you legitimately you fuck something up, and okay, well,
mistakes happen. Yeah,
things happen, and
Yeah.
and you weren't paying attention. I mean, even just driving your car to going to the grocery store, maybe you get distracted. Your kids in the back seat and they're yelling or something like that, and you take your eyes off the road for a second, you get into an accident. Okay, well, that sucks, but what do you do with that? Like that's a pretty bad situation. But now it's like, okay, this is a learning lesson. Okay, I'm not saying ignore your kids, but pay more attention to the road.
Yeah.
That type of thing. But you really have to figure out, like, how do I adjust from whatever that situation is. In that moment when things are not going your way. Keep in mind the end objective, whatever that end objective happens to be, and figure out what's the next best course of action to get me to whatever that objective is. You were talking about, exercise earlier. That I think before we started recording, this exercise that you guys were doing, and it was kicking your ass.
Oh, it sucked.
And it's like, okay, yeah, in the moment it sucks, but be grateful for the opportunity that you are in good enough physical health that you can get out there and go punish yourself a little bit and get better from it.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, I think, what we talk a lot about on the podcast, if we go back to kind of the Edison example too, right? And that's focus on the process, not the outcome, right?
Yeah.
If you're so tied up in, well, I've got to make this work and it has to work now, then, when you do have the third, fourth, fifth failure, you're probably going to be more prone to just throw your hands up and go, fuck this shit. I'm not doing this anymore. This is too hard, right? Yeah. But if you're focused on the process of, I'm trying to get to this point, then every failure just becomes an opportunity to learn at how to get closer to getting to whatever that final outcome is, right? And I think it's the same when it goes to mental health too, right? There's an outcome that you want at the end of it, maybe things that you need to unpack and learn some skills and some tools on how to cope and deal with certain things. But it's really that process, right? It's the process that you go through of unpacking those things and having the courage to face some of those traumatic events or failures or whatever they may be. And then learning from that, what you need to do, shift, adjust, pivot, so that you can make yourself better and kind of dig yourself out of the hole that you feel like you're in, right? It's another perfect example of being focused on the process of what you're going through and trying to find the small victories in that process versus what that eventual outcome is going to be.
Well, I'm not a therapist, right? And I don't have any degrees on my wall that prove that I'm educated to talk about any of this shit. But what I'll say is you hit on something really good right there. And I was going to bring that up in a minute was, for a person who's just been getting kicked in the nuts over and over for, however long period of time, missed a few mortgage payments, your car might be getting repoed, your wife is getting ready to leave you, like life is not going good, right? What I would encourage that person to do is find something that gets you a small victory. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Do something where you can feel good about that moment, right? And that'll remind you what it feels like to be happy, even if it's just for a fleeting moment, right? And maybe that will help you start to reframe some things and search out that feeling a little bit more and go, maybe you get another victory. Maybe you get another small win. Maybe you went 2 days without having a drink. That's a victory, dude. Celebrate that, not with a drink, but celebrate that feeling that you had. And hopefully over a little bit of time, you can stack some of these things up and start to feel a little bit better about yourself.
Well, go ahead. I was just going to say, and I just want to throw this out real quick. And regardless of where you are, whether you're a veteran who has, a ton of resources available to you that you may not recognize because you've stiff-armed the VA, or the myriad of other organizations that are there outside of the VA that do supportive services for veterans, or you're not a veteran, there's still a ton of stuff that's available.
You can't throw
out there,
a rock
right?
on
Like,
the internet.
Dude, if you're struggling with alcohol, go to an AA meeting. Like, there's ways to find help, because at the end of the day, here's the bottom line is you may not have the skills and tools that you need to really overcome some of this stuff. And you've got to find ways and people, whether it's a therapist or a group or whatever, that can help you build those skills and help you develop those tools so that you can overcome these obstacles. these challenges that you're facing.
That's a little courage and humility mixed in there too.
It is.
Where
There's
you
a
have to
ton.
admit that you don't have all the answers.
No, you have to set your ego aside,
Yeah.
you know, and you have to be willing to, like, dude, we talked about this last year. Ask for help.
Yeah.
Like, it's a superpower, right? Stick your hand up and
That's
go,
right.
dude, I don't have the answer to this and I need help. Please help me. Like, that is a superpower.
And there are so many things in life that we do ask for help for from other people, other professionals
That's right.
in other industries.
But for some reason, there's a fucking barrier there
when it comes to
your mental health.
Probably one of the most important things that you can ask for help for. And, you know, your physical health, your health overall. I mean, without that, I mean,
well, you've interviewed a lot of people on this, and you've talked a lot about mental health and suicide and therapies and ways to get through this stuff. What has anybody really drilled down into, like, that stigma that's wrapped around
or the
mental
barriers?
health? Yeah, some, like, people are less willing to admit that they have a mental problem because their fear of being shamed or put into some kind of bucket or whatever it is,
being exposed.
Yeah,
well,
for some reason,
judgment.
Even especially in the military community. I mean, you guys probably are more aware of this than anybody, but some people might even be at risk of losing their careers over things like this.
Oh, it was a big thing.
Yeah,
the security clearances and things like that.
Is a big issue.
You know, if you're going to get help for this, well, then I don't know. Are you okay to be flying? You know, this multi-million-dollar jet. Like, I don't know. Like that might be a problem for some people, and they're like, you know what? I don't want to go talk to somebody who's going to end up having to report it to my chain of command.
Yeah.
You know? But to your point earlier is, you know, if you're having trouble drinking, go to AA, right? If you go to AA and it's not helping you for whatever reason, try something else, because there's something else out there. There, like you guys were saying, there's so many resources for, I don't care what the problem is that you're dealing with, whether it's PTSD, whether it's drugs or alcohol or finances, whatever the issue is that is really getting you. There are so many resources out there. And if one doesn't work, try something else.
Yeah.
And keep trying something else, because again, that's part of the process is I'm going to try something. And it may be one of those 10,000 things that I try that doesn't work, but eventually I'm going to find something that works. And maybe that light bulb, it's actually I wasn't planning on this, but it's actually a good analogy because now we get the light bulb moment, right? The light bulb goes on, ding, right over your head. And then something clicks and you're like, you know what? I think I got this.
Yeah.
Like I now it makes sense to me, you know? And one of the things in one of my therapy sessions that I had been in that made a lot of sense to me was that we accumulate tools over the course of our lives. You know, everything from tying your shoes to driving a car to whatever your job skills are and all that. And in the military, you know, we very much learn to compartmentalize things. You know, there's a time and a place to be upset and sad about something. You know, like when my brother was killed, there was a time and a place for that, but it wasn't in that moment that I found out about it, because about 15 minutes later I was getting shot at. Like, I kind of had to put that away.
Yeah, you got to compartmentalize it.
No matter how much that sucked, I had to put it away.
Yeah.
And so we got really good at that, right? But we have all these skills that we accumulate over the course of our lives. But imagine a contractor who's going out to build a house or something like that, and they get back of their truck, they got all sorts of tools, they got ladders, they got everything you can imagine. They got the whole Home Depot in the back of their truck, basically. Could you imagine them walking into the job site with all of those tools on their belt?
Yeah.
It'd be fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't get anything done. They'd have too much shit. So they just take the things that they need day to day.
That's right.
Yeah, of course, there's going to be that one-off case that they need that specialty tool that they have locked up in the back of their truck, and so then they go out and they get it and they take it out, right? But sometimes there's people who are just dealing with stuff, and they're dealing with things using all of the tools that they've accumulated. They might be driving down the road and they might see some trash off the side of the road, and they can't deal with that because in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever they were, that meant danger. That's where the bombs are hitting, and I just can't.
It's weird how you associate things like that.
Yeah. But driving down Main Street of whatever town you live in, probably not a bomb there. It's
probably low threat.
Trash. Yeah, probably just trash, right? So you can put that tool away. You don't need to have that high alert tool that you used while you were in wherever you were deployed to, you don't have to have that tool out all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So we learn a lot of things, but sometimes we don't need to use all of it.
No, I got a decent example of that one too, where just the other day I was having to do some work on my sprinklers at one of my properties, and I got my little toolkit, right? I built up my toolkit of all the things that I thought that I would need. I go over there and I start changing things and working on things, and things escalated, and I go to my tool bag and I don't have the one tool that I need. I need a multimeter, and I left my multimeter at home. Damn it, because I was troubleshooting some other shit at my house. It slipped out of my bag, so to speak. So what do? I phoned a friend. I got a buddy that lives right over here, just north of my neighborhood. Hey, man, do you happen to have a multimeter in your house? Yeah. Dude, I'm going to be over there in 5 minutes. And let me borrow it. I'll bring it right back to you. And so it was super easy. So the metaphor there is you may not have the tool that you need, but somebody else might.
Yeah.
So that's the importance of asking for help and talking to people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when that's a great example, by the way. I like how that actually kind of all fit in. But think about all the other things that you do that you ask for help from other people. Like I'm not a mechanic. And when my car starts making these squeaky noises, I'm bringing my car to a mechanic, and no one's going to look at me like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with that guy?"
Yeah,
or
what a dumbass,
taking
his car to mechanic,
or I want to get a haircut. I'm going to go get my haircut from somebody else. Like
both of the things that you just said, I do myself.
Yeah, well,
so I have problems.
We know that.
No, okay, so that's something that you have in your toolbox. That's something that
those are skills you built.
I'm a tight ass. I'm a cheap guy.
Okay, well, that's another skill.
I spent an hour changing the oil in my truck yesterday because I'm too cheap to take it to Jiffy Lube.
Okay, I'm sure there's something else that you call somebody at some point. And like that's okay.
Well, you and I were talking just in the opening pages of your books. I was asking you for some advice earlier before the show, so I'm not afraid to raise my hand and ask for help or ideas or explore something. I've been trying to get Richard on the phone for a little bit to explore his brain and try to figure out some of the marketing and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that we say on the show, we say all the time, humility is a superpower. And when you get to the point where you can raise your hand and say, I fucked up or I don't know, dude, you just opened a door to a whole new world where people are going to help you out, man. And I think that we've all found, generally speaking, people are eager to help people. If you ask somebody for help, they're going to help you. And if they can't, they're probably going to get you in touch with somebody who can.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm not a mental health professional myself either.
But you're a conduit.
Yeah, exactly. But I've done over 400 episodes on my show talking to people with all sorts of different experiences and things like that. I probably know somebody that I can hook.
That's
you up
right.
with. If there's a problem that you're dealing with, or there's something that you want to try, it's like, hey, I just don't know where to go to. What do you recommend? I'll find somebody. And if I don't know that person, I'll find them. Like I'm pretty good at finding people.
Yeah, on your I was cruising your webpage earlier, your podcast webpage, and for the listeners, go to driveonpodcast.com, and at the bottom of it, there's a whole list. Like there's probably 15 or 20 different resources of phone numbers and websites and people to reach out to get you in touch with the right person.
Yeah. And so you don't even have to ask me. I just put it out there.
It's just there.
It could be anonymous if you want. Like I don't need to know that you went to my webpage. Like
that's awesome.
But I'll find you.
That's great. So getting started with the podcast and then writing the book and everything, what has been what do you feel like has been the most impactful thing that you've done? Do you have like a big success story or somebody that has given you some feedback and changed because of what you were talking about?
I think the podcast, just in general, has had a lot of impact on folks. I get messages every once in a while from people who we were talking about this before, where people reach out and they're like, "I'm really glad that you had this topic that you're talking about, and I really needed to hear it right now. And this was the message I needed." And so, going back to why did I start the podcast? It was like I wanted to just help one person stay here, not make any kind of rash decisions or anything like that. I wanted them to stick around. And so, I get messages like that. And, I think that that's what really has an impact in these people's lives, and so I want to do more of that. I want to get more messages out there. Other people who maybe struggle with something and they figured stuff out, because maybe the message that turned that light bulb on for that person might be the same message that turns light bulb on for somebody else. I tell people that your success story, your story through, whatever journey you went through might be the story that somebody else needs to,
to make a shift.
Yeah, to make that shift and get through,
Yeah. Well, on those lines, I was going to talk to you because I think one thing that a lot of guys that have been to combat struggle with to a certain extent is that survivor's guilt. And you mentioned that was a big piece for you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about like just what that process was like for you and the tools that you learned or the skills that you got through, different methods to kind of overcome it?
Yeah. So, for me, the survivor's guilt stems around the loss of my brother.
Yeah.
He was my younger brother. And so, just look at society and what they tell you about, the older brother, you're supposed to be the protector. You're supposed to be the one who protects him. Well, clearly I failed. I didn't protect him. Right. And so I started going down this rabbit hole of like, that was my job. That was like my sole mission in life at that point was to be the protector. But if you look at it, like we didn't serve in the same area. We weren't even in the same company or anything like that. We were in two separate areas. We were like 90 miles apart or so. And so like, what could I have done? Like steal a helicopter and fly to him or something? Like, I don't know.
Exactly.
I couldn't do that, Now you can go even further back and what if it even more and be like, well, what if I joined the same unit that he was in and I just happened to be with him? Then maybe I could have done something to help him. Like these are all what ifs, and you can what if something to death.
Oh man, you can.
Yeah. And you can really screw yourself up with all these what ifs. And the more you do it, the easier it gets to continue to what if it and go down that rabbit hole and keep digging. And the harder it is to get out of there, right? Of course, everybody could have made a different choice, but the fact is you didn't. What you have to do is make the best decision with the information available at the time, right? So you made a decision years ago maybe, and it impacted something that's happening today. Okay, well, what's the next best thing? And so dealing with the survivor's guilt, for me, it was like, I shouldn't be here. If he's gone, I should have done everything up to including sacrificing myself to protect him. But then I think, okay, well, let's play that out. What happens if I did do that? Well, at the time I had a son. He was 9 months old. He was born just before I was deployed. He wouldn't have a father.
Yeah.
My wife would be a widow. My parents would have gotten a second knock on the door. Good would have any of that have done for anybody who is still here? Like none of that would have done any good. And I still struggle with that sometimes. I still feel like, I still should have done more, despite the fact I can logically talk it out with you guys right now.
Yeah.
And have, but
there's that emotional piece.
That emotional piece still creeps in, and, it was just this past Thursday actually was the 14th anniversary of my brother's passing. And it was a rough day.
Yeah, I bet.
I was not good, but you just have to look at what's that next best thing. Right now, I have 3 kids. 2 of them
that's that gratitude that we were talking about.
Yeah, 2 of them wouldn't be here right now if what played out in my head had played out. 2 of them wouldn't be here. And so they're all great kids. All 3 of them are great. Love doing stuff with them and everything. And I wouldn't want to change any of that.
Yeah.
Would I love to have my brother here? And he would have been an awesome uncle because he was just great with kids. But you know what? That's just wasn't in the cards.
You know what? Here's something to look at too, man, is when you look at the ripple effects of something like this, right? Obviously it sucks. Okay. But would you have started the podcast? Would you have been able to reach out and touch as many people as you had? Would you have potentially saved? I mean, there's no telling how many people have listened to your show and listened to someone on your show and gotten their shit together because of that.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you can't necessarily grade that or put a scorecard on it, but there's a potential that none of that would have ever happened had it not been for that event.
It is definitely possible. Because a lot of times I'll sit down, just this past July, I was booked almost every single day in July, I had an episode that I was recording. So I wanted to get ahead. I was starting to slip behind. I pre-record everything. So I wanted to get ahead. And so I just made sure. And there were some days towards the end of the month where I was like, man, if this person calls and cancels, it would not be the worst thing in the world. But then I was like, okay, why am I doing all of this? Well, there's people out there who might need to hear this message from this particular person. So I was like, well, yeah, maybe it sucks 'cause I'm tired and I've done so many of these things and I've been talking forever, to all these people or what seemed like forever. And I just wanted to take a break, but it's like, well, maybe I can't take a break. Maybe there's somebody out there who needs to hear this message and I need to put it out there, and so I kept going. I just pushed through and drove on through it.
Has the podcast been part of your healing journey as well?
I think in a way, it's almost more therapy for me than it is for other people. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's great therapy for other people who just aren't in a place where they feel like they can talk to people for whatever reason, but maybe listening to the stories might be what they benefit from. But one of the things that I found is when you're having these conversations on the podcast, very often the guests that I have on the show, I've never met them before. Like, before.
Yeah, we never met.
We never met before.
No.
Actually, today is the first time we met in person.
That's right.
So, I had never even spoken to some of these people before. But by the end of the conversation, it's like I've known forever.
Yeah,
almost. Yeah. It like I get into the details of their story, their background, and then they talk about the healing things that they've done and or what they've experienced and everything. Yeah. And it's like there's some therapy there.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff that comes out of it. So.
Dude, we got an episode coming out here in a couple of weeks. We do the first Friday of every month. We kind of set that aside for our Q&A type thing. People send us questions and we'll try to deep dive into maybe one or two kind of topics there. But for this one, we got it coming out. We've been doing this for about a year, and we wanted to just kind of communicate some of the things that we've learned over the year doing this. And it's almost exactly what you're talking about, man. It's like, it's been really good for us to do this, to stay engaged and give us something to look forward to and keep our minds going and give us topics to research and deep dive into. And so I can see where you're talking about there's a lot of personal pride and a lot of personal feedback that we've taken away just from doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's good conversations that happen, and they're beneficial for not only the listeners but for yourself. But when you don't have something like this, you start to get into a routine maybe, and you might just start finding yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it's just like Groundhog Day, that movie. And not to say there's it's necessarily a bad thing to have routine. I actually think routine and structure and things like that are really good things.
It's because you're a military guy.
Well, of course. Yeah, Army.
Sergeant Major said paint a rock. I got to go paint a rock.
That's how we do it in the Army. But anyway, I think it's a good thing to have some structure, but you have to have some outside things, a little flavor to it. You have to change things up.
Dude, that's a really good segue into something that I wanted to kind of get into, and I think we tend to focus a little bit on the veterans, and one of the conversations that comes up a lot on our show anyways is your personal identity as a military member. And then one day somebody hands you a flag and you walk away and that part of your life is over with. For us, it was retirement. For you, it was separation, whatever it is. But do you think that has an impact on people, that loss of that identity?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you, have you taled to people about this? Do you have experience in this?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, go down that rabbit hole for a second.
Yeah. So, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording too, is that you tie yourself into this identity of being a service member, being a soldier, an airman, Marine, whatever your service was. You tie yourself to that identity, and there's this big overall sense of purpose where you are serving your country.
Yeah.
Or, in the case of National Guard, not only you can serve your country by being deployed, but
it's your why
for your community,
for everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And you become that person or whatever that job is, like that's you. I am an infantryman. I am a pilot. I am a medic. I am a, whatever it is that you do.
I am Sergeant DeLuzio.
Yeah, exactly. So you have these things that are tied to your identity, but then again, like you said, it's almost like a light switch. It just goes off, and now all of a sudden you're not this anymore. You're just a regular guy.
You're just Scott.
You got to go find your 9-to-5 job, or whatever job it is that you do, and you're that guy now. And like, I don't know. I worked in insurance after I got back from Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like, could you find something like less exciting to do? It was like I just came back from Afghanistan, where we were like literally hunting down the Taliban, and then I go sit in a cubicle for 8 hours a day, working in corporate finance for an insurance company. And I, nothing against people who do that kind of thing, but to me it was just, I was doing it, and I only lasted there a couple months after getting back, because I was like, this was mind numbing, and I hated it. And so yeah, you do have a sense of purpose, sense of identity,
and belonging too, right? Because that's your tribe. You're part of that tribe.
I was going to get to that, the camaraderie that's involved in that, right? And then you lose all of that. And yeah, sure, you might stay in touch with people for a little bit, but people move away, and you grow apart and all that kind of stuff, as everyone has experienced as you get older. But you're more than the uniform or the job. And I know those are big pieces of who you might be, and who you might feel like you identify with, but you're more than that. And you might be a father or a mother, or a brother or a sister, or a husband, or there's those things too, that those aren't being taken away from you. So like, okay, there's that, right? You might be a student, you might be a something else, but there's changes in life all the time. And if you're a student, you're gonna either graduate, or you're gonna drop out, or whatever. Like that's gonna change at some point. If you're I don't care what job it is that you do, eventually you're gonna retire. From whatever it is, hopefully, you get a chance.
Even Tom Brady had to hang him up, man.
Yeah, exactly. So even someone like that, who, like, you say Tom Brady, and it's just like instant football is like the first thing that comes to your head, and all the success that he's had. He hung it up at some point. And,
that's right.
Like, now he doesn't do that. He does other stuff, or he doesn't have to do anything if he doesn't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got enough freaking money.
Yes.
But we're not all that lucky. So no, not taking anything away from any of that, but there's a lot of stuff that we tie to this identity, but we don't need to focus on that. We're more than that, and we can pivot and change what we're identifying with.
Yeah, well, I'll just say a couple of things on that, because I think it's really important. First of all, is that we're all going to have transitions in life, and you're going to have more than one, right? So and those transitions can come in many different forms. It can be changing job, it can be changing career, it can be college to be becoming a professional in whatever you're going to do. It can be becoming a father, right? It can be retiring from the military. One of the most powerful things, that book that we talked about when we did the 5 books, I talked about that book, Transitions, which is really good, and it talks about that whole process. But the bottom line is, dude, read a book. A chapter has to end for a chapter to start, right? You don't move into the next thing. You don't get to start writing that next chapter of your life until you end, put the period at the end of whatever chapter you're coming out of. So that's something that I'll throw out that's always been helpful for me as I've gone through those things. But the other thing too is, I think this speaks to what we talk about on the podcast, which is the importance of defining personal values. Because if you take the time to really define personal values for yourself, and they're going to shift over time, like we've talked about, but if you go through that process, if you have some self-inspection, you're honest with yourself, you define your own personal values, those values shape your identity, right? Those are the things that you can cling to as kind of the pillars of the person that you are. And those can transfer to whatever you do. They're not tied to a uniform or a position or a title.
It's like the underlying current.
Those are the things that carry you forward.
That's right.
And, when we're younger men, especially in the military, we get taught all these things, and, the discipline, the different core values are. And we kind of take those on as our own to a certain extent, and those are kind of the things that we're brought up in and believe. And if you've never done that process of defining personal values for yourself, and then all of a sudden all that stuff gets put on a shelf, you'll probably feel a little listless and lost to a certain extent, right? So if you're one of those folks out there that are listening to the podcast and you're in that position, dude, go back to episode, God, what, 4 or 5? I think 5 was defining personal values, right? And go through that process, man. Take the time to figure out what's at the core for you. And that will help give you some rudder and direction as you kind of muddle your way through whatever the transition is that you're going through.
Dude, that shit happened to me, man, when I retired.
Yeah.
It
happens to a ton of us.
You kind of have this now what moment. I just spent my entire adult life doing this one thing and becoming this one person. And now you kind of have this, I'm sitting at home and I'm not doing a whole lot. I don't have that thing to look forward to every day anymore, or those people that I used to work with to go and see and hang out and talk shit with and, make MRE bombs and all the fun stuff that you used to do, and you don't have that anymore. And it took me about 3 years to snap out of it.
There's a decompression process. I just got back yesterday from one of my best friend's retirement ceremonies. The guy spent 26 years in the Air Force, retired as an 06, 30 if you count, the academy.
Mm-hmm.
This guy has known nothing but the Air Force since he was 18 years old.
And now he's standing there holding a flag going.
And now
shit.
He's driving off the base going, what? Yeah, and he's already kind of got a second career started and everything too, but that's not what it's about. It's not about the fact that he can go fly airplanes somewhere else, it's all those other things, It's what I mean, he's dedicated his entire life to
becoming that thing,
the Air Force, and to moving up through things and taking care of people. And all of a sudden that's just kind of evaporated, and it's a weird place to be, man. It's really
so
tough.
sudden too.
It is.
It's
just
final.
over. There is a very there's a lot of finality to it, right? Because it's just all of a sudden you're not that person that influences anything anymore, right? You don't have control, you don't have influence, you don't have the ability to impact people's lives. You're not teaching all those things that you've been doing for so long, So
one of my really good lessons in that was right after I retired. I took a job with Lockheed Martin, doing some stuff over here on the base. So on Friday, I worked over here on the base wearing a uniform. And on Monday, I worked over here wearing khakis. Okay. But that move right there, I didn't have a CAC card. I was like an alien dipped in AIDS, wrapped in a hazmat suit. Like nobody would talk to me.
You're like a leper all of a sudden.
Yesterday, I could have called you and I could have gotten answers. Today, you won't even let me in the door. What that, So, I mean, it was eye-opening, man.
Yeah.
It's like, no kidding. It is final. You are done. You are now Mr. White.
Yeah.
And that means jack shit to anybody.
That's right.
Yeah. But just to go back to, that's why I think defining personal values is so important, because it can help you navigate that stuff and separate out, Jason Cooper, the person, from Cass Cooper, the fighter pilot.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to something, and it's going to feed in, I think, a lot to what we were just talking about, though, is when you started telling your last little vignette, you talked about, we were talking about you losing your brother, and society had told you that being the older brother, you're supposed to be the protector. So where I want to go with this is the messaging that we get, especially as men, and even another tag onto that would be veterans. The messaging that's out there for us and our specific demographic is not all positive. It's all a bunch of tatted up dudes wearing kit. And if you're not one of those guys, then you're not either in the cool crowd or you're not masculine enough or something like that.
Yeah. Sometimes when you see some of that, you can tell when it's being forced.
Oh yeah. We
very
laugh
easy
at
to
it
see
because we know what's behind the door.
Yeah, whatever, dude.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like you're trying to
get over yourself.
But yeah, the messaging isn't all positive. We get that you have to be the protector of the younger, the weaker, or the much older, those sorts of people.
The whole wolves and sheep thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you're supposed to protect the flock, which fine, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. We need to have those people in our lives, but in my case, like I obviously wasn't that, in that moment.
There's a time and a place, though, right?
There is a time and a place, yeah. And so you have to have give yourself a little grace, I guess, and be like, look, I can't be everywhere for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be everything for everyone. I can do my best for, what it is that I'm doing. Crying out loud, I was I was serving in the Army, trying to protect the country.
Mhm.
Like, sorry,
Yeah.
one person slipped through the cracks, and I happened to be a very important person to me, but
But you're not patrolling your house. You're not patrolling the perimeter on the weekends at night.
my nods on.
That's right.
Yeah.
around the backyard.
You're not slipping over your fence with your M4.
Because a cat jumped over the fence or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm out, assaulting the objective. Like that's not what I'm doing.
On the other hand, we have a home alarm, ADT alarm system, and it's like 2:00 in the morning or something. My wife and I are sound asleep. All of a sudden, the alarm goes off. Right. So I jump out of bed and I sleep in the nude, and I sleep with earplugs. So I'm already prepared, right? I got my earplugs in. So I jump up and I grab my Second Amendment out of my bedside drawer, and I come out the room like this. And there's I think he was 16 or 17 at the time. There's my son standing there going, "It was me. It was me." I was like, dude, you came this close to getting shot by a naked guy, right? Because I was prepared to defend my house.
Yeah.
Right. So being that protector that's all well and good and everything, but you don't have to be running around on the weekends in the dark with your kid on.
Right. And I think that goes back to that toolkit example that I was talking about earlier. Like, you have the toolkit, you have the tools available to you, you know how to use them. You just keep it in the drawer.
Yeah.
Until
right next to my Second Amendment.
Until you need it. Exactly. Right. And when you need it, you know where it is.
Mm-hmm.
You've trained on it, you've practiced, you're proficient with it, and you do trigger discipline enough not to shoot my kid. Not to shoot your kid. Exactly. So you're perfectly capable of doing those things. And I think that there's a difference between being dangerous and being, or sorry, I'm slipping on the words right now. That's okay. It's a difference between having the ability to do the stuff that you did to be able to defend yourself and your family. Should that person have not been your son and it was somebody else, you had the ability to go out and do that versus being harmless.
Well, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about being dangerous, being a dangerous man, but he also talks about temperance and discipline with that.
That's right.
There's a time and a place. Like, it's okay to be dangerous. It's okay to be that guy, but you also need temperance with that. And that's one of those old Stoic principles that goes back thousands and thousands of years of learning to discipline yourself and know when to pull that out.
Yeah.
Right. Coming out of the room when my alarm goes off, that's the time and the place. Somebody's in my house that's not supposed to be there, right? But also having the discipline to not be walking around my house in my kit all the time, just all fired up and gung-ho, or having the discipline to analyze my target before I pull the trigger, things like that.
Well, and think about it. If you were to walk around your house in your kit, ready to go 24/7 all the time, how long is that going to last?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, or it's not sustainable.
You might be able to defend the shit out of your house for a day or two.
Come in holding your mole. Look at I got my kill today.
Yeah, exactly. but unless like World War III breaks out in your house in that day or two, you're going to be useless. Yeah. Because you need to rest.
Could be doing other things.
You could be doing other things.
Yeah.
You could be going out, to your job, making the money that you need to provide for your family. You might.
Yeah. Where else could your all that attention be applied that would be so much better for you and your family and the people
Got
around
a lot of
you?
energy you could be putting into something else.
Think about what that does to the other people around you. If you're constantly walking around,
if you're on edge, they're on edge.
They're going to be like, maybe I need to start paying attention a little more to what's
or they're going to be like, oh, crazy dad's out there patrolling the backyard again,
or that. Yeah. There's a lot of things that happen, but also just like think about those other people. Like how are you showing up for them?
Yeah. Oh, Cass just got a chubby because you said showing up for somebody, and we talk about that a lot about how are you going to show up for the other people in your life. Yeah. And I think going back to the personal values things and setting some of those boundaries and being able to nug through some of these things, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When I first got back from Afghanistan, I was not showing up for anybody. My head was all jacked up. Everything I was doing, I was quick to get angry. I was drinking too much. I was doing all the things wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't until just one day I looked in the mirror. I was like, man, this is not the person I want to be. I don't want to be this kind of dad to my kid. I don't want to be this kind of husband to my wife.
God, that's huge.
I want to be the fun dad. I want to be the one that they can joke around with and have fun and do that kind of stuff. But it was like they all were like walking on eggshells around me because they didn't know what was going to set me off next.
Yeah.
So what was I doing for them? How was I really showing up for them and helping them, in any way?
Yeah, that can be a great external motivator, right? Is when you put your effort and your consideration into the people that you love and focusing on how to get better so that you can be better for them.
Realize the ripple effects of your actions.
Right.
And I find that the external is a greater motivator than the internal ever will. So if you don't have family in your life, get a dog or something, now your purpose is that dog. I need to show up and provide for that dog, take the dog on walks, feed the dog, take care, play with it, all that kind of stuff. But if you have kids, it's like, you want them to grow up to be better than you.
Yeah.
You want them to grow up and have a better life, not just like a better career or whatever, but you want them to be happy and healthy and all the things. And if you're constantly showing up as this angry asshole, which that was me, they're not going to have a better, happier life. They're going to be, constant. They're going to have anxiety by the time they're 6 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and time's a tricky mistress because she's moving forward, and you've got a finite amount of it, and you have choices to make. You can choose to get better as that time moves forward, or you can choose to stay where you're at, or you can even choose to let things devolve into something worse as that time moves forward, right? And I think part of that recognition too is that there's a lot of things that are just outside of our control sometimes. Like we talk a lot about on the podcast, man, you got to focus on the things you can control. And like in the situation with your brother, there's a lot of things that are completely outside of your control for how all that went down, and that you had no influence over, or ability to influence, or even ability to be there to try to make a difference necessarily.
If you think about it too, just logically to your point, even if I was standing right next to him when he was killed, wouldn't have made a difference.
Probably wouldn't have changed anything.
It wouldn't have changed the trajectory of the bullet that hit him. He still would have been targeted, just the same. So it really wouldn't have changed much.
I think it's interesting. You made a comment earlier about think that extrinsic motivation is better than intrinsic motivation, and we almost say sort of the opposite on here because, but we want to talk about it though, because what we're talking about is we focus on getting down to an individual level and kind of almost not even worrying about whatever else is out there. Right, you just focus on you and focus on yourself and your own self-improvement, and I think a lot of that has to come from within. Doc John was talking about, going from being extrinsically,
just say externally motivated.
Externally, thank you, Cass. Words suck. I'm not good at this.
I had that moment too.
External motivation, because that's a finite resource.
Yeah, right.
And eventually that could run out. You said get a dog. Well, your dog could die.
Yeah.
And so that's why we tend to lean more towards the intrinsic motivation. You can find that inside yourself. I think maybe that propels you for longer.
Well, the way I look at it is the internal, what's your why? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why are you going to AA if you're an alcoholic? If it's just because, oh, well, you know what, I want to get healthy or whatever. Well, okay, that's a good thing, obviously, but I also don't want to be a drunk around my kids, and so maybe my kids are my reason why I'm doing this, but it has to be, you're right, it does have to be internal.
No, that's good.
But I need to have, and maybe not everybody is this way, this is just the way I see it, I need to have that external reason why. Because if it was, think about it this way, if it was just me on this planet and no other human being existed on this planet, it was just me, why would I do anything? What would be my reason why?
Yeah. I think it's a lot the same, right? It's just semantics, but it still comes down to, as an individual, you have to make that decision. You have to get to a point in your life where you go, I don't want to, like you were saying, Scott, I don't want to be this guy. Like, I'm looking in the mirror going, who the fuck am I looking at? Like, why am I doing these things? Right. Yeah. And that motivation, you internalize that you need to make the change, and you're the only one that's going to have the fortitude, the drive, the motivation to go out and figure out how to make those changes, how to realize those changes in your life. But that can come from external motivation of, I'm doing it because I want to be a better father, or I'm doing it because I want to be a better husband, or right. Those are all motivating factors. At the end of the day, it still comes down to you as an individual internalizing that and going, I'm going to make this change.
Yeah.
I've got to be responsible. You know, it's like when we talked to Ryan, right? There were some external factors driving him to want to make, but it was just, dude, I can't do this anymore. Like I've got to clean this up, because if I don't, I'm never getting out of here.
Yeah.
And so,
I think the balance there though is, regardless of the feedback that you get, are you still going to do that thing? And that's where I think our conversation comes back to the intrinsic motivation, coming up from inside of me. I do this because this is who I am. I'm not necessarily doing this because, I want to be a better husband or father or whatever. I'm doing this because this makes me better as an individual, and therefore I will be ... And so I think it's just an interesting discussion of where that comes from in somebody.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's overlap in all that. Kind of like what you were just talking about. There's the reason why, the internal reason why, but there's also some external, external benefits maybe.
Yeah,
maybe we can look at it that way. Where I want to be a better father. I want to get sober. I want to do these things. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to be a better father because of it. I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better employee. I'm going to be a better
it translates into a bunch of different things.
So things get better as you get better. Things in life will get better.
You start going to the gym because you want to lose 10 pounds.
Right.
What happens when you lose the 10 pounds and now you have 0% body fat and you look awesome? Do you still keep going to the gym? Maybe there's some I don't know, some takeaways from that.
I would
now
love it if I could lose 10 pounds and 0% body fat.
Wouldn't we all? Yeah. I've not been doing good lately. That part is, I need some external motivation to get me going on that. Well, but that's a good point though, is because external, when you're first starting on that journey, it may be that external motivation.
Yeah.
But eventually, you lose the 10 pounds, you look awesome in the mirror. And now where are you getting that motivation from?
Yeah. This just kind of brought up another thought, and we can go down this rabbit hole. I don't know. When you're in basic training or whatever, military training, you're getting the drill sergeants in your face, and they're screaming at you, right? It's a pretty damn big external motivator. To get you moving.
But you need that in the beginning, though.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the point is, you do need something like that when you're just getting started. Like why am I going to bother losing those 10 pounds or what benefit is it to me? Like for me personally, if I don't care, I don't care, about it. But oh, well, maybe I can't keep up with my kids while they're out playing. Well, maybe I need to get in better shape so I can do that. Okay, well, that's my external motivator. And now I've gotten to that point, and now internally I want to.
Yeah, but your kids grow up, and they're like, for us, our kids are grown and they moved out of the house. Does that mean we stop working out because we're not playing with our kids anymore? No. And when you were just saying that, I told you I was listening to the episode that you and I did on your podcast a while back, and we talked about this. We were talking about the military guy who sees trash on the floor.
Oh yeah.
And he stops and he picks up the trash, right, where a bunch of other people have just walked past it. Well, in basic training, you have a drill sergeant yelling at you to pick up the fucking trash, right? 5 years later, you're in an airport. There's no drill sergeant. That's just who you are now. And I think that might be the difference between the external and just, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm the guy that picks up the trash on the floor.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that example, because I'll be out now after that conversation that we've had. I'll be out and I'll see the trash. And this is something that I've done, along the way anyways, but I'll see the trash and I'll go and I'll pick up the trash and I'll throw it away. But every time I think of that conversation, that it's like, it's not just me. It's like, we all know.
We're all weird in that way. It's funny.
Well, I've got a question for you, Scott. And like Roscoe said, none of us are professionals with plaques hanging on the wall, but with the conversations that you've had focused on mental health and suicide prevention, for our listeners out there that may be friends or family members of somebody who maybe they're concerned with, are there indicators that you've learned from the folks that you've talked to, things to look for that may be valuable for people to kind of pay attention to? I only ask because I have a friend of mine whose brother lost his brother to suicide. Much like you and I do sometimes now with the bros that we lost last year, you kind of play rewind and you start to see, there actually were signs. And in that particular instance, like the greatest sign that he had that his brother had made a decision was like for about a week before, his mood completely changed because he had made the decision that he was going to do something.
Happy.
So he was happy.
Yeah.
He started giving things away that were valuable to him, you know, and it was there, but everybody kind of missed it, you know? And so I just wonder if through the conversations you've had, if there's specific indicators or things that people who may have a friend or a family member that they're worried about can look for.
You know, those are big things. I think each situation is going to be a little bit different. Obviously, there's some people we were talking about this before that I've lost who it's like you never would have expected it.
Yeah,
and you just didn't see it coming. You know, I've had you know, one guy in particular. I talked to you know, another buddy of ours, you know, a mutual friend, and he had just, you know, been hanging out with him, and like seemed like everything's fine, you know, and no signs were there or anything like that. And then, you know, a day or two later, he was gone, and it's like, where the hell did that come from, you know? But things like that, like what you were talking about, are definitely things to look out for. And I think, and again, none of us have the plaques on the wall, you know, but from what I understand, anyways, is, you know, you have the spectrum of you got happy on one end and you got sad on the other, and all the varying emotions that you have those two extremes, you know, the real happy, real sad, right? But a lot of times people find themselves somewhere in that middle zone, never really experiencing any great happiness or joy or anything like that, and never really, they just don't give a shit. They don't really have the sadness, and they're just somewhere in that middle. And they've just been going on that middle path for so long, and they're just like, life is just dragging the life out of them. Like it's just awful, you know? And if you think about it, like someone who might be, you know, sad right now, they'd be like, I would love to get up to that middle zone. But if that's the high that you get is just, you know, like that's pretty fucking miserable.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if that's where you are, and then at some point in time, you come up with this idea that, you know what, there's a way out. I'm just going to take my own life, and I'm going to be out of here. And I don't have to live in this.
I don't have to deal with this anymore.
Right. Like, holy shit, I'm happy now. Right. And so then that's that mood shift that you were talking about, where all of a sudden it seems like they're happy
because you found a way out.
You figured something out. Right. And it's like, I got a plan. I have a way out. You know, it's almost like planning a vacation, you know, like you're like, I know, I got the tickets. I got the hotel. I'm looking forward to this.
Looking forward to the date.
I'm looking forward to it, you know.
Such a balance though, man.
And it's hard, you know, because I think you have to pay attention to the big picture, right? Don't just be like, man, that guy's happy. I don't know. There might be something going on with him. It's like, well, generally a happy guy. So, okay, well, but maybe there's nothing really going on with that, right? But if it's like for, you know, weeks or months or years or whatever, it's just like, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, this big shift.
Yeah.
That's something you might want to pay attention to. Or, you know, they got all their valuables, you know, that they're giving out to people. You know, I gave you guys a copy of my book. Like, obviously, like that's an important thing to me that I gave away, but I got like 50 more copies. So it's not like I gave you this treasure that I had, you know, like, you know, so, you know, there's different parts of that you have to kind of look at the context of it too. You know, if I'm giving you my, you know, grandfather's, you know, gold watch or something, you know, something I hold, you know, valuable.
I was really hoping you came over with your Babe Ruth autographed baseball, but I'll take the book instead.
You know,
I guess
I gave that away to the last guy, the last show I was on. So, you know, but no, but seriously, I think you have to look at the context of all of these things too.
Yeah,
I think you're onto something there, man. And looking at trends over time, and you know, in both of the examples that we had last year, the trend was just a constant downhill.
Yeah, it was steady
downhill, and eventually there's a bottom. But for us sitting here, we don't know where that bottom is.
Yeah,
that's between their ears. On the flip side of that, when you look at some trend data, like I've seen this once or twice in the recent past, where an individual has a bad day or has a bad event and they go into hysterics. That's pretty normal for this person. Like when something doesn't go their way, they go into hysterics and start yelling and screaming. And then eventually they threaten to, well, I'm just gonna, okay, you're probably not. Like I'm willing to roll the dice on this one because of your past experience. Now they could surprise you, but it would probably be a complete surprise. for that one. Those other two, I don't know that those were complete surprises.
Yeah, well, and I think too, when you're talking about, I think what's hard when you have maybe a friend or a family member who's just kind of on that steady downhill slide is it's a little insidious, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of change that you see because it happens over so much time, you know, and it gets progressively worse, but it's also, it also starts to meet expectations to a certain extent.
Yeah, I could see where that,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, oh, they're drunk again. Shocker, right? You know, or
Oh, they didn't show up for work
they
today.
didn't show up for work again. Shocker, right? So I think that's something to, in context too, to just kind of keep your eyes open for, like, because it can be very insidious. And you don't know, like you were saying, Russell, you don't know where that bottom is.
You don't know where that bottom is.
What's going to be that trigger point that finally...
And maybe they don't either.
Yeah.
You know, that could be they're just having another bad day, but that's the day.
Yeah. Well, and it could be hard too, because if they're not sharing, it could be the loss of a relationship that they really valued because of, whatever kind of hole they've dug themselves into. But we don't know that that's happened, right? But that's the thing that kind of pushes them over the edge. Or so anyways,
it could just be a thought.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, it could just be something that's like, I'm thinking back to this time that I fucked up royally, and it's just, it brings them down, and it brings them, they're not in that narrow zone anymore. They're now down. Instead of going happy, they're going down here, and they're
full
like,
sad.
I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's not a great place to be. But I mean, definitely talking about things. If you got people in your life, I think that you're questioning, is this going to be something that they end up doing? Come right out. You thinking about killing yourself?
Yeah.
Just be blunt. Like,
it's uncomfortable.
It is.
It is.
Oh yeah.
But you got to do it.
And we're talking about like society and their expectations and things like that. No, that's one of those things. That's taboo. You're not supposed to talk about that kind of stuff. Well, okay, fine. I'd rather talk about it and be uncomfortable than have to sit at your funeral.
Yeah.
And
that's a great point.
And listen to your eulogy and all this other shit. Like, I would rather just be blunt and say, what do you got going on?
Dude, if it's not podcast related, I don't put a lot of shit on social media.
I don't either.
But after that event happened, I did put a post out there, and hopefully in the future it'll pop up in my memories so that I can go back to that moment. But I was talking about that, and I titled it "Be Weird." Like, it's okay to have the weird conversations. It's okay to have those uncomfortable conversations, because exactly like you said, man, I'd rather it be weird between us for 5 minutes than to go sit at your funeral.
Yeah.
I would much rather have a weird conversation and have you talk about that with your friends for 10 years than next week go to your funeral.
Yeah.
And never have those conversations.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big things for me, kind of looking back at both of those incidents. I don't know how we would have done something different. I don't know if we would have done something different. Obviously, if we would have known that this is the way it would have ended, we would have been more proactive. But when you're in it, when you're seeing it every day, it's so easy to just kind of, like CAS, like you said, and it's like, okay, that checks, and move on, and like I said about the one, it's like, I had this conversation with another guy. I'm like, short of going to his house in the middle of the night and putting a bag over his head, what else are you going to do, man? Like, we've called him, we've talked to him, we've given him resources, we've offered to.
Well, the reality is, there's probably not much you can do, right? Because until they're ready to help themselves, until they hit whatever that rock bottom is for them, and they're willing to start to make a change. I don't know, man. I think it's difficult. That's a difficult spot.
There was someone I was talking to your point of showing up to their house, putting a bag over their head. I mean, obviously, you don't want to kidnap somebody. That's probably
maybe you do.
Maybe you do. I don't know. Depending on where they are, you might just do it. And say, screw it. Well, I'll deal with consequences later. But there was someone who called. I forget if it was a suicide hotline or if the VA has a hotline or whatever it was that they called. People showed up at their door like 10 minutes later.
I was going to mention that.
And they were there to just sit with them.
Yeah.
And we've done that.
Just listen and like just be there to make sure that it's kind of like a quick response force. Like,
it is. And just for the listeners, if you need it, or if you need to pass it to somebody, 988, you just dial 988, and that's the suicide and crisis lifeline.
Yep.
And it's for anybody, veterans as well as non-veterans. You call that number, and they have people that will pick up the phone, and they will get people to you and get you the help that you need to prevent you from going down that road.
We called 911 one time as well, and said, "Hey, this person's in the house. The kids are there.
Yeah, you can do a welfare,
we think that
welfare check.
Exactly. We think this person might be ready to harm herself and or the kids, and they sent a ambulance and a uniform over there.
They're getting smart on that too. A lot of police forces now have social workers that will go out on those types of calls specifically to help people get in touch with resources.
Awesome.
So I don't know how many, but I know that that's happening.
Yeah.
So
speaking of resources, you got a bunch listed on your website. You want to throw a couple of those out?
Oh, God, there's so many on that.
Yeah.
that list.
Just give us one or two, or
what I try to do with that list is anytime I have somebody who represents some sort of organization, like a nonprofit or somebody that works with veterans in different ways that aren't your traditional, talk therapy types of thing that you might be able to find at the VA, but people who do like equine therapy, or I had somebody who did surfing as a form of therapy, and it all sorts of different things that are out there that you wouldn't think about it. Race car driving was another one that people use as just it's not necessarily like a formal kind of therapy, but it's more like that camaraderie piece that you miss, because it's a bunch of veterans that get together and they're racing cars.
I got a great one, man. Like three or 4 years ago, I was trying to stand up the Arizona chapter of the 4-Wheel to Heal. There are they're based out of California, and they take guys out jeeping, take them out 4-wheeling for a whole day, and they'll get a big convoy of jeeps, and they'll assign seats, and you got a veteran. Most of them are disabled. They kind of go towards the disabled veterans, but you strap them in your jeep and you take them out 4-wheeling for a day, man. So there's all kinds of programs out there like that,
right? And so that's what I like to put on there is I want to have like a one page kind of resource situation, right? Obviously, we have like the 988 and other
national type stuff,
type things on there too. But there's localized places. There's people who take people out on sailboats and that as well. So there's so many things, and so we were talking about before, like if you're dealing with alcohol issues and you go to AA and that doesn't work, well, okay, there's probably something else out there, right? And so I'm trying to put those something else out there. All of those different types of resources. Awesome. And you put me on the spot trying to name some of those. Okay, so
is it on your, because you have your personal website and then you have your podcast website?
So go to the driveonpodcast.com. There's a link at the top, like veteran resources, and it's broken out by category. So the type of things that you're looking for, you'll be able to find. I even have from authors, I try to list the books. I'm not great at keeping this page updated, so there's a lot of stuff that I probably missed, but it has a lot of resources on there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so even if you don't want to sit there and listen to an hour episode, or however many episodes you want to listen to, go through that list and just start clicking on the links and find the resources. Their web pages do a pretty good job explaining what they do. Go through there and find it. We were talking about figuring out if so anybody's actually listening to the podcast or anything like that. We were talking about that before. It's like, I don't really care if people are listening to it. As a matter of fact, I hope I get to a point where nobody has to listen to my podcast.
Exactly, right?
Especially in that niche.
And I hope I kind of work myself out of it's a hobby. I don't really make any money off of it or anything like that. So I hope I work myself out of that. But I don't care where people get the resources from. You go to that page and you find the links and you click it and you find something that works for you. Wonderful. That's great. That's why it's there. If you're podcasting, listen to podcasts are not your thing, don't listen to it. Go to the list of links, and I don't care where you get the information.
Do you do a blog or anything like that?
No, I put the transcripts from the episodes on the website as well. Actually, if you prefer to read and not listen, they're there too. Any episode, you just go and click the thing.
We've got another dude coming on the show here in a couple of weeks that has a nonprofit specifically for veteran suicides. I'm going to put you guys in touch.
Yeah,
I think you guys will have a good conversation. Yeah. So when we do that interview with him, I'll put you guys in touch.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep, that's awesome. Cass, anything else, man?
I don't have anything else, man.
Scott, what else you got, man? I know you're pretty active on Instagram. Where else can guys find you?
Yeah, Instagram, and Twitter or X, whatever they call it now. I've been using that lately because they allow you to put full length video on there if you have the whatever verified account or whatever.
Okay.
Like you can put the full length episodes on there. So I've been doing that, and so those two are the big ones. I'm on all the social medias, all of them at Drive On Podcast are the handles. So look at Instagram and Twitter primarily are the two that I have the most activity on.
Cool, dude.
So.
Parting shots.
Be the change.
All right, be the one. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.